We have Jennifer Blakesley here, and she is going to introduce herself, but she's going to talk about academic support networks this afternoon.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I've been preparing for this all week, and in my academic support network, I'm connected to a couple of the people who thought up this project and developed it that culminated in this big week. So it's very exciting for me to see all your faces and to talk to you about that very topic, academic support networks. So I know this week you've been talking a lot about mentoring. It comes up over and over in support networks, and that's because it's really important. And it's something, it's like Summer said the other day, I was here for her presentation, and she said that cliche, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But that really does matter. It matters that you know something, but also it's who you know that can help you put you in the right position so that you can do something with the stuff that you know. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And Summer talked about how our networks include the relationships we have directly with other people, but we also have access to all the people that are in their network. So we want to be thinking about not just our own relationships, but who are those people connected to. That's how we expand sort of our reach of opportunities. As you go through undergraduate education and beyond that, that's really going to be important. And Summer talked about 4 domains: personal, daily life, career, and academic. Today we're really just going to be talking about academic, although that also includes career. So, as you develop your through the academic years, you're also working on that eventual career, but we're going to be talking about it in terms of, when you're on campus, who are you connected to, what kind of support are you getting? And when you're not on campus, in your personal life, what kind of support are you getting related to academics? So I'll talk more specifically about what I mean by that. So when we talk about mentoring in academia, we're talking about a team of people. So you want a team of mentors supporting you in different ways. They're going to support you at different levels. It's going to be different as you move through each stage of being a student. So there's undergraduate education, as you move into graduate education, and beyond that. Who's already thinking about grad school? Anyone? Awesome. Highly recommended. I sort of forgot to introduce myself, didn't I? It was really hot on the walk over here, so heat stroke. Okay, so I'm Jennifer Blakesley. I'm in the School of Social Work. I'm a research assistant professor, which means I get to call myself a professor, but I don't teach usually. And when I work with students, they're usually grad students, and it's one-on-one. I actually did my undergrad and my MSW, Master in Social Work, and my PhD here at Portland State. I'm from Portland, and I just sort of wanted to stay. And I was lucky enough to have the connections in my academic network that when I graduated with my PhD, I was able to stay because I developed projects. So once I got the degree, I had work that I was able to do. So I just now sort of use those same network connections, which I'll talk specifically about some of the people that have helped me to develop projects as I sort of grow into an independent researcher. So, okay, that's me. And one of my primary mentors is Tom Keller, who I think you guys met yesterday, so I'll be talking about him with him in the room. What did she say? So yeah, Tom's been my mentor for 7 years. Okay, so think about all the people that might be in your academic support network over time. So right now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Summer talked about how you're going to have role-based situations, so it's going to be people you work for, it's going to be people, kind of research assistantships you might be in, intern placements, and then also along the way you're going to meet people that you just click with, and it's really easy to sort of move into that mentoring relationship. So you'll have both kinds of those. In network terms, they're also called ties. So if I say tie, I mean relationship or connection. You're going to have short-term versus long-term, so 7 years long-term. But some of my mentoring relationships have been sort of 6 months, or maybe you take a really good class, you spend some time outside of class with the professor, but that relationship doesn't, you don't really do much with it after that, but it's really helpful for you at the time. And then when we talk about weak ties versus strong ties, so that's academic for weak relationships versus strong relationships. And when we say weak, we don't mean that in a bad way. When we think of your networks, you want to have a combination of strong relationships that are providing you regular, multidimensional support, but you also want kind of those one-shot targeted relationships where you go to somebody for something very specific. And maybe it doesn't last very long, but it helps you at the time in a very specific way. Versus we've got those family and friends and long-term mentoring relationships that we know those aren't going anywhere. But a functional network has both of those. That's how it kind of grows and expands, is through those weak relationships. And I'm going to skip to social capital. Summer mentioned social capital, and that's just sort of, it means a lot of things. It's kind of a fuzzy academic concept that can be very useful when you want to talk about what we're talking about today. So social capital just is sort of the value embedded in your relationships, in your networks, so those direct and indirect relationships. And we can think of that as a bonding function where networks are sort of, they have a core and they're cohesive. So if one person leaves the network doesn't fall apart. So you think about families look like that, or a classroom over the course of the year. Then we've got bridging capital, which are those shorter term relationships that connect us to other networks. So if you think of all the people you know and all the network connections they have, even just in the room with all the faculty, the number of people they're connected to that you have direct access through to those people by knowing faculty members, that's really powerful. So we want both that bonding function in networks and that bridging function so we can get information outside of our sort of close ties. So I want to talk about different kinds of academic support. So mentoring is a really big concept. We all know what it means, and a lot of things are included in that. So when I was thinking about what we were going to do today, I wanted to narrow that down to some specific mentoring functions that I think at this stage of your careers, it's really great for you to start thinking about these things because it's going to matter a whole lot as you move forward. So we're going to talk about 5 different functions, and I'll explain each of these, but I want to give you that kind of snapshot. So we're going to talk about mentoring in your field, so your particular interests, people that can spend an hour with you talking through your research interests, and they know more about the topic than you do, so they can just sort of download knowledge into your head. We're going to talk about sponsoring, which is different than mentoring. Sponsoring, you could have somebody who's both of those things. You could have somebody who's all of these things or one of these things. But sponsoring is more about somebody who advocates for you when you're not in the room. So they're a higher status and they use their kind of power and influence on your behalf. So they hear about a job opportunity and they say, oh, I know the perfect person. And they give that person your name and then they come to you and they say, hey, I told this person about you. So when you email them, they're going to expect to get your email. So they're kind of opening doors for you. A coach is more kind of a skills-based, developmental. So it's focused on learning how to do a specific thing. A collaborator is someone you're working with. So it could be a peer, it could be someone who's further along in their development, but you're working on a project together. You have a shared goal. And then emotional support, we all know what that is. That's the sort of safe space where we can vent, and those are more likely to be peers than mentors. You may get that from a mentor, but we'll talk more about that. So you can map out this academic network, and you can sort of narrow down which people provide what kind of support. So that's what we're going to do today. And then we're going to talk about that support in terms of functions and how helpful the support is to you personally. So your kind of subjective experience of, okay, this tutor was really helpful to me, or this tutor didn't really help me a lot. So thinking about relationships from your perspective. Okay, mentoring in your field. So I realized a few years into my graduate education, as I was starting to get exposed to different projects, mostly in the doctoral program, that everything I was involved in and interested in tended to fall into 3 categories. It was either about mentoring, usually youth mentoring, or it was about social networks. I liked social networks. Or it was about youth exiting out of public service systems, so like foster care or juvenile justice. And I noticed all the projects usually combine 2 of those things. So I want you to think for a minute. I know you guys are working on your elevator speeches. Think for a minute about your personal interests, and if you could narrow that down to like 3 snapshot pieces that sort of represent different dimensions of what you're interested in. So maybe you're interested in mental health in African American communities, and you took a statistics class and you really liked it. So just take a minute, sort of think through that. And I know you're just developing your interest right now, so you're not going to have to report out what you say, but it's going to come up later. So take a minute to do that. Okay, does anyone want to report out what theirs is? Okay, that's okay. So if you think of those 3 things that you're narrowing down, you're just getting started. Those interests are going to change anyway. As you're thinking about those, the mentor is who you're going to go talk to about those things. So they know a lot about the literature. Or maybe if you're interested in mental health treatment, maybe they're a provider in the community who's been working in it for 30 years. And if you were going to develop a research project, they can tell you how to approach that. This is when you're going to be having kind of longer conversations about your ideas and developing your interests and seeing sort of presenting to an expert, hey, this is what I'm thinking about this, and getting their feedback on that. It's really, really valuable, and it can be a shortcut. If you prepare before you talk to one of these mentors, if you really think about, okay, what are some answers that I can't get on my own that this expert has just at the top of their head, that time is super, super valuable. So when you get those opportunities, take them, value their time, but they will appreciate talking to someone who's excited about the things that they're excited about. I promise you that. So value their time, follow up with them, and let them know when their advice helped you. So they may not respond to your follow-up email, but they're going to remember that they got the email, and it's a way to stay connected to them. Any questions about mentoring in your field? Okay. A sponsor. So sponsoring is really, really important. A sponsor is someone who has higher status or more influence than you. They're kind of automatically a few steps ahead in the academic ladder. So that's not a peer, it's not a near peer. It's someone who has a little power and influence that they can move around through the relationships that they've developed over the years. So you can take advantage of that. It especially matters when you're not in the room. So if you're not in the room able to make a great impression on somebody, but someone has already heard that you're a hardworking student, you're excited about research, and they would be great to work with you, that will matter. Their opinion's going to matter, because these academic networks, as the years go by, those people have developed relationships over time. So if one of Tom's colleagues says, you should really check out Joe Smith, he's a great student, if you're looking to hire someone, give him a call, that's going to matter. Their opinion's going to matter, because these people have developed their relationships over time. So it opens doors, and this is where your reputation as a committed student matters a lot. So you can think of being a student as sort of a full-time job, and your job is to learn as much as you can and to contribute to other people's learning. Be reliable, add something to the conversation, and maintain that reputation, and it will travel. Faculty members talk to each other, their friends, their colleagues. So if you're doing a great job, people will hear about it. I hear about grad students, that are excellent, that I've never met before, but when I do meet them, I already know that people are vouching for them, so people are sponsoring them. Does anyone can they think of someone specific who sponsored them to get here this week? So someone who recommended them or came up to them. Yeah, do you want to tell us who that is?
One of my science instructors at my school just casually walked by me one day and was just like, hey, you know where you're going to go to school? And I was like, between OSU and PSU. I said, how are we paying for your education? And I said, financial aid and stuff. I was thinking about finding scholarships. He's like, well, maybe here's a scholarship that the NIH is a new scholarship that the NIH is funding. You should look into it, apply to it, and look into it and apply, and here I am.
And didn't it feel good to have someone say, hey, we're going to pluck you out of the crowd? A lot of sponsoring went into all of you guys being in this room today. So doors are already opening for you. You're already on a path that's already set, and it's just a matter of sort of following it and maintaining your relationships, getting good advice, acting on good advice, connecting with your peers, developing your interests. So I'm really excited for you. Okay. Coaching. So I wasn't sure whether to use the phrase coaching or skills coaching or tutor or advising, but what I wanted to get at is somebody who knows how to do something that you need to do. You're doing the work, but they're walking you through the steps. So maybe you're working in a lab and you're brand new, they're your supervisor, they're a grad student, and they're kind of showing you the ropes. or you're going to the writing lab, or you have a tutor. So it's not necessarily, it's about you as a student and an emerging professional and researcher. It's not necessarily about your personal research interests. That's what the mentoring's about. So this could be, an academic advisor who, just the school's academic advisor that you meet with once a term. Or it could be the front desk person if you're in the sociology department or the psychology department who knows everything about the department and can help you figure out what classes you should take. So it's sort of walking you through those steps. It can also be a peer who just has a skill that you don't have yet. A good example I thought of with coaching was the first time that I wrote an article with Tom. I didn't know how to write an article for peer review publication, and there are a whole bunch of steps you have to take. And the only way, there's no classes in writing an article for publication. And in a few years, those opportunities are going to start coming up for you, and grab them when they do, by the way. But there's a whole bunch of steps and emails and places you have to go and ways you need to phrase your email. There's a protocol that's existed for decades, if not centuries, about kind of how to succeed in academia, and there's kind of a role you need to put on, and someone has to show you how to do that. And if you've got a mentor or a coach that you're working with, they will happily show you how to do that. But they're hard skills to learn on your own, and again, there is no class. So it's helpful, specific feedback on how you're doing and how you can improve, and involves being coachable. And I added that because I know for myself, sometimes it's hard to be coachable because, we feel a little bit defensive when we're in new waters and we don't really know what we're doing yet. So we kind of have to let down our defenses and allow someone to coach us through a process if we trust that they know what they're doing. So it's really important, and it could show up in a lot of ways, and these could be peers, they could be people further along in their development. Collaborator, so that's someone who's working with you on something. So it could be a peer or someone at a higher level, working together on projects. You have a shared goal, you're learning from each other. It's a joint thing, and it's an important thing. And one thing I want to say about collaborators is a good way, I know Summer mentioned reciprocity in networks, so does the relationship go one way or does it go both ways? Do you learn from each other? Do you provide support to each other? And some relationships it's going to go one way and you're just receiving support, and that's great. And sometimes you're going to have an opportunity to sort of build reciprocity with people you come in contact with, faculty members, or if you know people are working on a project, volunteer if you can find an hour or two. Volunteer to help them. Maybe you're a graphics whiz and your mentor's kind of a fuddy-duddy when it comes to that stuff. And you know that he's working on something and struggling, and you say, let me do that for you. This is nothing for me. That's helping them, and they're going to think of you next time they need help. And it's going to become a more reciprocal relationship that can grow over time. So find collaborators when you can. And a lot of your peers are eventually going to be collaborators. A lot of my collaborators now are people I was in the doctoral program with. And lastly, emotional support. So like I said before, someone you can vent to when you're upset, when you're overwhelmed. They understand you. It's a safe space. They can talk to you about kind of work-life balance stuff. So balancing the demands of being a student with your personal life. Those are things you're not usually going to go to a faculty member for. If you develop a close mentoring relationship a few years in, maybe that'll be part of it, but most of your mentors aren't going to be able to really help you with that stuff because they're not students anymore. They might not remember what it's like. So those are going to be your peers. And when we talk about your networks, I want you to be thinking about the emotional support that you're getting, maybe from people in your personal life, but if it's about academics. So maybe I'm going to show you a map I did of my academic network, but it doesn't include my best friend. Did I talk to her all the time when I was in school? Yeah. Did I talk to her about school? No, she didn't really know much about academics. But I did include people in my personal life who had heard everything about school, so they knew who I was talking about when I said Dr. So-and-so. So you want to think about, okay, so there's emotional support for your life, but emotional support for academics. And a lot of times that's going to come from your classmates and peers who are right in it with you and know exactly what you're going through. So academic support network map, we're going to pass one out. Do we want to do that? Have we done that? Oh, yeah. It's sitting right there.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah.
Well, it's good. You don't need it quite yet. We're going to look at mine first. So we have two goals.
The boxes on it?
Yes.
Okay.
we have two goals for today. We're gonna pass out two big pieces of paper for you. The first one's an academic map, support map. It looks a little bit like what Summer did with you the other day, but we're talking specifically about academic supports, and this is for you to keep. And I'll sort of walk you through who you want to put on this. And then we might do this again in a year, and you'll look back and see if it's changed over time. But this is for your use. We're also going to do, the second thing we do is we're going to ask more about those relationships in your network and what kinds of support you're getting from people. And that one's for the program evaluation of EXITO. So we'll keep that. Your name won't be on it. It'll just have an ID number. We'll talk you through that part. And then we'll look at that a year from now and see if there are changes. And we should have some extra blanks, so if you want to, if you mess it up and you want another one, you can have it. But again, these are for you. I wanted to show you an example of mine. So this is from a few years ago. I graduated from the doctoral program in 2012, so I did my best this morning to remember what my network looked like at the time. But it was sort of easy because a lot of the same people are still in there. You can fill this out however you want. I just threw the names up there. You can draw lines between them and yourself. But I want to give you an example of some of the people that I put on mine. So first up is Tom. Tom's over there. Tom was my dissertation chair. He was my professor first. He was a mentor for many years. He was an advisor. He was my boss for many years. So I had lots of opportunities to get the different kinds of mentoring from him. Two of the people I have up there, Bowen and Pauline, were sponsors in that when I was a master's student, they wrote my recommendation letter to get into the PhD program. So that was very valuable. I put Pauline D up there. She was the program assistant for the PhD program, and all the students relied on her very much to help us figure out what classes to take and make sure our registration worked out. Who else was on there? I've got Sean S. Sean was a community partner, and when I was as a student, he runs a community agency. He was willing to let me be placed there and sort of work on some projects in the real world, which was really valuable. Over in peers, I mostly have people that were in my cohort at the time, and I got different kinds of support from them. A lot of them are still colleagues. They're people I write papers with. They're people I'm still in touch with. But at the time, they were all providing academic support. So I knew other students. These were the ones that I saw most often. They were in my network. They were available for me to call on them for support. I didn't necessarily call on all of them for support, but they were there. And I knew that I could. And then down in personal, so this is what I meant. I think there's a fly in front of the projector. So I have more people in my personal life than these two. I am an introvert, so I don't have a lot more, but I do have more than two. Aunt Lori heard so much over the years about everything. So she's the one where if I said Dr. So-and-so, she knew who I meant. Oh, that one. Even though she knew nothing about academics, she knew nothing about research, she had listened over the years enough that I could actually call her with a school-related problem. Or she used to be in sales, so sometimes she helped me write emails to try to convince people to support me. And then my friend Emily worked at the research center with me and knew all the same people as me. So if I was working on a project, or if I was figuring out how to ask somebody for support or how to work with a senior researcher, she also knew those people. So that's why I put her on. So I just want to give you an example of kind of how to think about which names go on and which names don't go on. Feel free to put anybody you've met this week if you think that there's someone that you're going to reach out to. You're going to stay connected with them. That's kind of the line. If you think that you'll reach out to them in the future, put them on your map. Okay, I think it'll maybe take 5 or 10 minutes to do this. I'll just sort of look up when you're done and I'll know we're done. And you don't have to finish it right now. You can hold on to this and finish it later. Do people need a little more time? Are you ready? Okay, I think most of you are done, so we'll move on. And you can go back to this. This stage is about brainstorming. And don't feel bad if you only have a few names on there. You guys are just starting out. The idea is by doing things like this, you're going to get names to add. So from an evaluation standpoint, we want you to only name a few people, because then we're going to throw all these mentors at you. And then your networks will grow. So yeah, don't feel bad if it's just a couple. So next, we're going to do an academic support network grid. So I think I'll read through these, and then we'll pass out what we're going to do next. So this is for the actual program evaluation. So this is a little more systematic and a little more serious than the map, because we'll actually use this to see whether the program was successful in connecting you with some people that are providing support in these 5 areas: mentoring your field, collaboration, etc. So the grid, when we pass it out, you'll see we want to narrow down the people that you've put on your map, the names that you brainstormed, to the ones who have actively supported you in the past few months. So the ones that feel really relevant to where you are right now. So some people aren't going to transfer over. That's totally okay. We want to get that kind of core network that you're in communication with, and we don't, on the next stage, we don't want to include people you met this week, because we want to get a snapshot of what your network looked like before you met all the people that you've met this week. So if you've got someone on your map that you know, a faculty member you met a couple days ago and you clicked and you know that you're going to email them to ask them some more questions, don't include them. You may include them next year when we do this again, because that relationship developed and they were helpful to you. So when we look at the grid, we're going to talk about their role. Who are they to you? So are they a professor, someone you actually took a class from? Are they your advisor? Are they a tutor? Are they a faculty member you didn't take a class from, but that you're working for them? So they're a supervisor or a boss. So try to narrow down what their role is to you personally. And you don't want to put their names on that one. So this is for evaluation, so we want to protect confidentiality, so that's why we'll call them by the role. But one thing I did on mine is I included the initials so that I knew who I had transferred over. Where do you know them from? So one of the things the program's interested in is if you're coming from one particular school, were you able to make connections from other schools? And we're going to look at mine in a minute, and you will notice I have not done a good job of making connections to people from other schools. That matters. We want you to go to conferences and meet somebody from Texas that you collaborate with on a paper. So that's why we're going to ask you specifically whether it's from a school, which school it's from, or whether it's a personal connection, a friend or family. Are they your peer? So either at your level of academic development or a little bit ahead, but pretty similar. So that's what we mean by peer. And which support functions of the 5 we talked about do you get from them? So it could be one, it could be a couple, it could be all of them. So just do your best to sort of narrow that down. That's one of the things we'll look for over time is do you get more of a certain type of support? Last, we want to measure of tie strength. So remember, Summer was sort of talking about how some lines are thicker and some are dashed. There's a bunch of different ways you can sort of capture the strength of a network tie. We're going to do it today by how often you talk to them. So that's a measure of how accessible the support is. So maybe you see them every day, but you don't ask them for support every day, but you have access to that support every day. How helpful is their support? So when you do ask them for support, is it super helpful? Or I don't think it says super helpful on the grid. It says very helpful. Or is it kind of helpful? I mean, kind of helpful is still helpful. And how long have you known them? So is it a longer relationship? Is it a stronger tie? Or is it just someone you just recently met? So here's an example of mine. I know you can't really read the details, but I'll give you an example of what the grid looks like. And do we want to pass that out while I'm sort of talking about this? And then we also want to, so you all have ID numbers. This is for evaluation, but we want to protect your confidentiality. We don't want anybody to know, once you fill this out, that it's actually you. So you've got ID numbers. So I know that what Adrian's done is she's generated ID numbers for you, and we'll pass around a sheet that has those connected to your name. So just find your name, you'll see your ID number, and then write it on the bottom left of the form. So you can be honest on this. You know, if there's someone in the room that you're like, nah, they're not very helpful, they won't know. You said that. And we have extras if you think you've got more than 10. Yeah.
What if somebody was instrumental recently but retired, and so we can't use them anymore?
So it's not someone you would reach out to.
I could, but they're not active. They retired this year.
If you think you could reach out to them, if you think you could send them an email saying and get their opinion, retired people love to still want to talk about their work. So yeah, if you think you could do that, then include them.
So I have 5 copies of these sheets, and I'm going to start in the front and just pass it along. Pick your ID number off the sheet, it's next to your name, and put it on this form. And then just keep passing the sheets around so everybody gets a chance to see them. And then I need to collect all 5 of those sheets at the end.
And so you'll see from my example, I want you guys to get started on this, but I just wanted to show, so sometimes like Tom's there at the top and he's 4 out of 5. But
Just to let you know, sorry.
No, it's okay.
There's the rest of the list is on the back. In case you're like me and I'm like, what happened to all the other people? Pass it down the row.
And it's okay if someone provides you help, but you don't personally find it super helpful. It's okay to say it's somewhat helpful. That's not, that's not a judgment. That's just, how useful was it to you? Oh, you're right. Yeah. Academic. Yeah. I do want to say again, this was mine after like 8 years of grad school. You might have 1 or 2 names. That's totally expected and normal. It took a long time to develop all these relationships. Okay, you guys just earned serious survey karma. Especially if you go into the social sciences, I believe in survey karma. When someone asks you to take a survey, you take it because someday you're going to be asking a bunch of people to take a survey. So you guys just clocked up some serious numbers. Well, that's all I had to cover, but I'm super excited because we have a little bit of time, and I want to talk to you about impostor syndrome. Has anybody heard that phrase before? Okay, we've got a few people. Okay, right now I'm trying to Google a graphic for it, but if not, I will just write it up on the board. Does anyone want to try to describe what it is, if they know what it is?
Basically, kind of when you're a certain way, like personally, I'm a certain way with my family, I'm a certain way with my friends, I'm a certain way when I'm in a classroom setting, and I'm a certain way at work. So it's kind of just that, imposter, like, yeah, so you kind of change how you are depending on where you are and who you're dealing with.
where you really feel like you don't belong because of who you are, and things around you aren't familiar, so it makes you feel like you're almost in the wrong place.
Exactly.
No, that you are in the wrong place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. Psychologists have studied this. I don't know if they use that exact name. They probably do. And it's very, very common, and we all feel that way, but we tend not to talk about it, so we all think we're the only ones. So this graphic represents what the best snapshot I have of it is. We can be in situations like if you're in a classroom, or even if you're talking to a mentor and you're in a work group, and you think, God, I'm not keeping up. I only know a little bit, but everybody else knows so much. But it's not true. They know about the same size, it's just different. And there's some degree of overlap, and that's where, when you guys talk about that stuff, you're like, oh yeah, now I know what people are talking about. But that's happening all the time. So if you're in a situation where you're like, I'm not sure if I belong because of who I am, or because I've only had so many years of school, or whatever, there are certain things that you already know more about in your interest area than maybe other people do. By the time you get your PhD, there's going to be a little niche of 3 or 4 things that you're the expert. If you're up there defending your dissertation, you know more than anybody about that particular topic. So it's just something to keep in mind, especially since you guys are just starting out, is when you have that feeling, check yourself, because it's probably not accurate. And know that other people are feeling it all the time, and no matter how high they are, no matter how established they are. Sometimes they're sitting in a board meeting going, oh God, I should have read up on that, and they didn't. So I'm glad I just had a moment to talk about it. It's totally normal. If you Google it, it's a legit thing. Does anyone have any questions about stuff we talked about today? Or social networks or anything?
I have a question about the surveys.
Yeah.
So will we be taking those periodically throughout the entire program, or just a before and after?
Adrian.
You will be taking them throughout the entire program. Are you talking about the one that came out this morning that some of you might have already taken?
I mean the one we just filled out.
This thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this actually, so our idea is to have you repeat this probably about once a year while you're in the program, because one of the goals of the program is to help increase your networks, right? So you have mentors and advisors and emotional support, and you have peers that you can connect with in your field, and so we want to see how you're able to grow those things and how those things grow. If they're not growing at all, we're not doing our job. So that's really important to us. So, but yes, unfortunately, as I think I talked about on Monday or Tuesday, whatever day that was, there'll be a fair amount of surveys, not as many as this week, but you'll see them occasionally.
And as someone interested in networks, I wish I could get your networks every month. So once a year is nothing. Okay, I'm out. Thanks, everybody.